Let me first start by welcoming some new members of the committee. Mr. Gurbaksh Saini from Surrey, Fleetwood Port Kells, and Jennifer McKelvey from Ajax. I got that one right. And always good to see you, Mr. Rowe and Mr. Ruff. Great to see you at this committee. And I believe we have Seema Akan on the screen. Welcome, Seema. And let me acknowledge, as we always do, that we are meeting on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. Welcome to meeting number 35 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format. Remind participants, particularly our online folks today, before speaking, please wait till I recognize you. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. And for those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. All comments, as you know, shall be addressed through the chair. So, pursuant to Standing Order 108.2 and the motion adopted on Thursday, September 18, 2025, the committee shall resume its study of Canadian energy exports. And I would like to welcome our witnesses. From Clean Energy Canada, Evan Pivnik, Associate Director of Public Affairs, and from Nergica, Frederick Cote, General Manager. All virtual witnesses have conducted a mandatory witness on boarding test, and each of you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, after which we will open the floor for comments and questions. And Mr. Pivnik, we're going to start with you. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Clean Energy Canada is a national think tank at Simon Fraser University focused on advancing and seizing opportunities for Canada in the global energy transition. This committee study comes at a vital moment. Canada is reorienting its economy and approach to global trade for a world where the U.S. is no longer a reliable trading partner, and the rules-based system Canada has relied on is under threat. At the same time, escalating global conflicts are accelerating an equally fundamental shift, the electrification of the global economy. Clean technologies are already dominating global investment. In 2025, of the $3.3 trillion of global capital spent on energy, $2.2 trillion went to clean energy technologies and electricity infrastructure. The electricity sector is now the largest energy employer globally. EVs are poised to make up 30% of new car sales worldwide this year, and last year renewables overtook coal power as the largest source of electricity generation globally. In the face of increasingly volatile fossil fuel prices, insecure supply chains, and falling prices for clean energy technologies, all of the countries Canada has sought to strengthen our trading partnerships with have doubled down on electrification as the safer long-term bet. The Korean government has framed the Iran war as a significant turning point and advanced new commitments to nearly triple the share of renewable energy capacity on its grid by 2030. China's latest 5-year plan aims to reach peak carbon emissions by 2030 and further secure its dominance in clean energy and technology supply chains. And just last week, the EU released a new strategy that expands efforts to reduce reliance on fossil fuel imports, doubles down on homegrown clean energy, accelerates electrification, and invests in clean technology industries. As Canada works to double non-US exports and attract $1 trillion of new investment, these are the global energy and investment trends that we must factor in. And this starts with expanding how we think about energy exports. Whereas oil and gas are the hallmarks of the conventional energy system, electrons, clean technologies, and critical minerals underpin an electrified one. Canada has all of the ingredients to compete globally and position itself as a clean energy superpower, a stable investment environment, affordable clean power, abundant natural resources, innovation, and one of the most skilled workforces in the world. But to succeed, Canada must focus on 2 priorities. First, we must rapidly grow and modernize our own clean electricity system. Second, we must prioritize and invest in the economic sectors and supply chains that underpin global electrification. As the spring economic update made clear, Canada's clean, affordable, and dependable electricity is central to our long-term economic strength. Securing this advantage will require Canada's forthcoming clean electricity strategy to coordinate our energy, trade, and economic policies, increase investment in local grids and smart technologies, and provide a pathway to build a new enterprise.
Juste une seconde.
Excusez.
One moment, Chair. I don't want to stop our witness in his tracks, but to protect the well-being of my interpreter friends, I would ask him to slow down a little, and then she might be able to inhale some oxygen.
Mr. Pivnik, just for the sake of our interpreters, if you could slow down a little bit. You still have 2 minutes and 19 seconds.
Thank you. Next, supporting clean economic sectors and supply chains is inherently a diversification strategy. Analysis shows that our existing clean energy exports are already growing faster with the rest of the world than with the United States. These sectors range from critical minerals to EV manufacturing to grid technologies. Global demand for key critical minerals such as lithium, graphite, nickel, and cobalt are poised to grow 2 to 6 times by 2040, overwhelmingly driven by clean energy technologies. Canada ranks among the top 10 for total global reserves of each and should position itself as a preferred supplier to key allies. Combining Canada's clean grid and high-quality ore reserves could expand green steel production to align with the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanisms and grow capacity for in-demand specialized products like electrical steel. And Canada's clean electricity supply chain, from clean generation and grid technology manufacturing to the innovation and management services that integrate them, is another opportunity we need to scale. To achieve this, Canada needs to map and then leverage our competitive advantage in these supply chains. While the pace of electrification may vary country to country, the overall direction of travel is the same. Growing our clean energy exports is the key to long-term economic competitiveness and positioning Canada as the type of energy superpower that will last. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pivnik. And we're going to move on to Mr. Cote. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Monsieur le Président, honorable
Chair, honourable committee members, thank you for inviting me to appear before you today as part of your study on Canada's energy exports. My name is Frédéric Cote. I'm the Director General of NERGICA, a college centre of technology transfer established in the Gaspé in Quebec, focusing on applied research in renewable energy and solar energy in particular, and their incorporation into electricity grids. We also work on hydrogen and storage. We work with manufacturers, independent electricity producers, public services, Indigenous and other communities, as well as universities. We work very closely with Natural Resources Canada on research that improves network reliability and on new technologies. We also represent Canada in research groups at the National Energy Agency on distributed energy. I'm also co-founder of the Northeast Grid Planning Forum, in a civil society initiative designed to promote better interregional planning of electric grids in the rest of Canada and northwestern U.S. In order to meet demand, electric energy production will have to double in Canada by 2050. A lot of this will be from wind energy, nuclear energy, hydroelectric power, and solar energy. This is an opportunity to develop businesses and communities, so it's essential that we have a genuine electrification industrial policy to enhance and increase our ability to develop, deploy, and export to both know-how and technology on the production side and on the storage side, transportation, transmission, and operation of infrastructures. Canada has world-class energy resources, and our capacity to transport electricity beyond our interprovincial and international borders is limited by fragmented planning and insufficient transmission capability. Yet provinces are all working solo. They focus on one-time exports or individual exports instead of working together. Electricity needs to be balanced in real time. Insofar as wind energy will increase, interconnected grids can reduce variability within regions, integrate varied resources, and make the grid more reliable. Interregional transportation is not only an electricity issue, it's a lever for Canadian clean energy electricity exports and important for industrial competitiveness.
need for inter-regional transmission planning. The Canada Electricity Advisory Council, in its report Powering Canada, recommended that the federal government and provinces jointly establish a policy framework to identify and support inter-regional transmission projects, including governance, cost allocation, and funding. From our work in Eastern Canada and the Northeast US, 3 practical steps would materially improve Canada's ability to expand clean electricity trade and support broader energy exports. 1. Establish a transparent inter-regional planning process that meaningfully includes provinces, First Nations, utilities, industry, and the public. Create federal provincial tools to advance priority projects, especially clear rules on cost allocation and access to financing for projects of national interest. Invest in shared open modeling and data so provinces can evaluate trade-offs consistently and negotiate from a common evidence base. In closing, Canada's ability to generate and export clean electricity and associated technologies and to strengthen energy security at home will depend on a clear industrial policy and building the right transmission backbone guided by transparent interregional planning. Energica et ses partenaires sont prêts à appuyer le gouvernement fédéral et les provinces.
Energica and its partners are ready to support the federal and other governments in developing practical tools. Thank you. I'll be pleased to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cote. Thank you both. We're now going to go on to our first round of questions. We're going to start with Monsieur Martel for 6 minutes. 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to our witnesses for being here. Mr. Pivnik, you pointed out that in the past, approval processes have been too long and costly. So does prioritizing some projects on the basis of contribution, clean growth that is, would that not add an additional layer of subjectivity and complexity to the regulatory process?
I think right now with the government's priorities of national interest or projects of national interest approach, we see that choosing of projects that offer opportunities to position Canada for a variety of different reasons. One, and there's the criteria that I've applied there, looking at climate competitiveness as one of them. Given a world that is electrifying, that is an essential piece when we're looking at finite resources, finite people's time, finite dollars, to make sure that those projects are building opportunities for where global economy is going, for where exports are going. I think the opportunity to learn lessons from this, where we've selected a smaller number, can then be applied to a wider suite. So it doesn't have to be either or. We can choose priorities and then take the lessons learned as we move projects through those processes and apply those lessons more generally.
Monsieur Pivnik, c'est qui?
Mr. Pivnik, in practical terms, who actually decides what a clean growth a priority energy project is, and on the basis of which measurable criteria?
Yeah, thanks for the question. At this point, we have a government process that is selecting projects. They are engaging with provinces to bring them forward. So there's a collaborative effort there. That from both, given we're talking about government investment on both sides, finite resources at governments at both the provincial and national level, that is the process that we've set out to date. In terms of the criteria we're looking at, the ability to supply exports, create jobs, add value in local communities, all of those are going to be absolutely essential alongside clean. We need to think about its ability to access demand from where countries that we're looking to trade with are going. And that's where the electrification trends playing out in the rest of the world have a critical role to play in when we're thinking of this from an export perspective, so that we're not simply building projects that focus on the short-term opportunities, but actually where countries are aiming to be themselves in the next 5 and 10 years.
Oui, encore une fois, vos travaux soulignent que la...
Once again, your work is highlighting the fact that China controls the refinement of many critical minerals. So it would be important to accelerate the energy transition.
Absolument.
China's role, they have been very clear. They are looking to be and are truly the only global energy superpower at this moment. They control 90% of many of the key supply chains, from critical minerals to clean technologies. There's a reason why Canada is being looked to be a potential provider for exactly those same things: critical minerals, clean technologies for other allies. We're seeing right now that dependence on one supply chain can offer quite a significant security risk for countries right around the world. Canada has all of the different elements. As I said in my opening remarks, we have top 10 reserves in some of the key critical minerals. We have expertise across the clean technology landscape in industries like steel, automotive, that can be leveraged. When we're thinking about our investments, we need to be thinking about how we position for those demands, not just the ones that exist today as well.
Oui, mais en pratique, là, est-ce que remplacer...
Yet in practice, doesn't replacing our use of Canadian oil by dependence on critical minerals controlled, produced, and processed abroad, will that actually improve our energy security?
Yeah. Right now, Canada is in discussions with countries right around the world. When we look at the EU, when we look at trading partners, we're integrated into the economy right now. That exposure to different countries, the ability for, especially in a system where the rules-based order is breaking down, that risk exists today. That is a challenge we already saw in putting tariffs in place, counter tariffs get put in place. When we're talking about our energy system, we absolutely need to prioritize domestic electricity security. The build out of our domestic electricity system is paramount. And it's why when we think about being a clean energy superpower, it's not just what we can export to the world, it's what we can build here. And it's making sure that from a domestic perspective, our electricity system has secure supply chains for its own build out, which as Frédéric Côté spoke to, is needing to double over the next 25 years.
J'ai pas chronométré, Monsieur le Président. Il me reste combien de temps à peu près?
How much time do I have left, Chair?
Encore pour vous, Monsieur.
Mr. Pivnik, to you again. When do you think we'll be in a position to produce 100% Canadian batteries on an industrial scale?
Fully integrated supply chain, that's going to come down to the investments that companies, governments make. We already have expertise and roles to play, and in terms of analysis that has shown from a battery supply chain perspective, all the way from the critical minerals to the materials that go into batteries to the processing and manufacturing of them, there are opportunities for it. We should expect to remain in an integrated global supply chain. We need to think about partnerships with other countries, whether we're talking about the current energy system and our current energy exports, or one that's looking at an electrified world.
Thank you.
We're going to be reliant.
Thank you. Thank you both. Mr. Gay, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a big thank you to the witnesses for participating today. Happy to talk to them. Mr. Pivnik, I will direct my first question to you. In budget 2025, we talk about the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit. We extended the tax credit to government-owned entity and Indigenous organization. Do you see that implementation of the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit as essential to build clean energy projects here in the country?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, absolutely. The Clean Electricity ITC is a vital part of it. I think the latest edition of the potential content requirements that are being consulted on right now is an example of where in the electricity strategy, we need to ensure that our trade, economic, and electricity policies are coordinated. If we're putting requirements for Canadian-made parts that aren't manufactured, we do risk adding costs and timelines to clean electricity projects. So while the Clean Electricity ITC is a vital part of lowering costs and lowering electricity bills for Canadians, we do need to be very deliberate about how we apply those content requirements, using them instead as a bonus process where the ability to supply Canadian supply chains adds to the bid as opposed to and has additional benefits as opposed to a strict restriction will ensure sort of the best of both worlds there.
Mr. Pivnik, you've obviously heard about a national electricity strategy that is up and coming. The Prime Minister has talked about it, has mentioned it. Are you encouraged that the government's moving forward with that, and more elaborate on what you would expect to see in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a national electricity strategy is vital. We're seeing when we're thinking about energy exports. As I've mentioned, domestic electricity system is absolutely vital from a competitiveness perspective. I think there's three specific pieces that an electricity strategy really needs to speak to. One is around interties. Canada needs to clarify the federal process, ability to fund, ability to help share benefits, ability to support interregional planning. That's going to be a vital piece of it. Second is being able to make investments to support local grids, smart technologies, distributed energy resources, their integration into grids. We need to modernize even as we build new generation. And the third piece, as I mentioned, providing some coordination between our trade, energy, and economic policies. The ability to provide a clear signal is going to enable greater investment into the electricity sector in Canada.
Si on continue là-dessus, on vient de parler de...
On the same topic, we've been talking about interconnections among grids to help us increase our exports. A lot of electricity is exported to the U.S., part of the Northeastern Corridor, which is strategic. You're very familiar with it. Can you please talk to us about renewable energy and the role they might play, particularly in the Northeast? I'm thinking of projects like Wind West in Nova Scotia, Boralex, with Hydro-Québec in Quebec. Tell us about projects that would help us boost our exports and maintain the demand for all the major projects we're trying to build here in Canada. Thank you. When we look at wind energy, because we're looking at capacity that will be added, the additional power generation capacity that we'll be adding in the coming years will be essentially wind and solar energy. In Eastern Canada, we have the opportunity to have very high quality wind energy resources. In other words, a lot of wind. We have excellent winds, and we can see how to correlate it with demand. In Quebec, a lot of heating is electric, so wind energy is also very available in winter, so there's high correlation between demand and production. There is an opportunity in the north to position Eastern Canada in the wind energy sector and to continue strengthening our capacity to produce components that can be used in major projects in Canada, components, elements that will help us boost our capacity to export both energy and technology. What's your vision of the interconnections, particularly in the East? How important are they in promoting exports? Yes, very. There's some work to be done in shifting some paradigms. We see historically what's been done in the provinces. It's very much on a north-south axis. That's the underpinning rationale. So we do need to strengthen east-west connections and make it possible to link grids among Canadian provinces. That will also make it possible to make the grids more resilient when we look at Canada's geography. In Nova Scotia, we have a lot of good winds offshore. In Quebec, we have stock reservoirs, capacitors that can help us stock power. So by fostering better integration among the provinces, I believe we'd be in a better position to coordinate these resources.
Merci.
Monsieur Simard, 6 minutes.
Mr. Simard, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Terry. I'm not a witness, but I'd like to take a couple of seconds to respond to my friend Richard, who was asking whether it might be possible to build batteries in North America, in Canada specifically. We have been presented with a battery entirely manufactured in Canada, and that includes the lithium and all other components and minerals in the battery. So yes, we could build up that chain. Mr. Côté, I'm happy to see you here. I visited your facilities. I have a number of times repeated what we said. It does make me look intelligent when I just parrot what you told me. I'd like to come back to something that is quite significant in your opening remarks. We need an industrial electrification policy, you stated. My friend Claude just spoke to you about the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit provided by the federal government. I'm thinking about you and Normand Mousseau of the Trottier Institute. I believe that this electrification policy is not really there. It doesn't actually exist, and it needs to be formulated and established. So what might be the first milestones or the first foundations that the federal government could use to put in place a policy of that kind? Thank you. An industrial policy on electricity. We know that primary responsibility would rest with the provinces, so there would have to be an exercise in balancing the federal government and the provinces. Yes, it's always difficult for the Bloc Québécois to be pointed in that direction. There is an important role for everyone to play. There are three aspects we need to bear in mind with electrification. It's not just the energy transition that's driving it. There's also data centers and digital sovereignty that needs a great deal of energy. So we need an industrial strategy because there's a strong security component there. We also need to be able to export our electrons, our electric power, because it's not expensive. We also have to think multidirectionally. North, south, east, west, we need not only to push power south, but also receive power from them so we can store it, as the Hydro-Quebec witness was explaining. We also have to consider the development of expertise, know-how, and Canadian technology, because that's extremely important. It's all well and good and strategic to export power, and we need to develop a full supply chain and value chain based on Canadian technology, on manufacturers able to meet needs, our electric power needs in the coming years, but we also need to export the know-how and technology of outside Canada. Thank you, Mr. Côté. I'd also like to open this question up to Mr. Pivnik, who can answer the question as well. There is some reconciliation to be made between electrification and critical minerals. That's clear. Those are two strategies that, in my view, go hand in hand. But what's also important there for both strategies is establishing storage systems. I visited facilities recently with storage solutions, and I'm seeing these initiatives coming, but I don't know how we can sustain them as a government publicly. You talked about wind energy and solar energy. That energy needs to be stored. How can we as governments support those facilities so that we can have storage to go hand in hand with the strategies? People storing energies, well, most batteries still come from China, so we will have to establish our own production chains. If you have any advice on that, I think it would be welcome. When it comes to storage, what we need to establish is how we see the added value of storage. For example, the battery strategies, like in Quebec, were an attempt to enter batteries or include batteries in the automotive supply chain. So it was more battery and automotive focused than electricity focused. It is important to underscore the value of storage in the power grid. We have the good fortune to have large reservoirs like in Quebec. That's very useful. But there are two dimensions to this. We need to support innovation, support businesses' ability to innovate so that they can develop batteries adapted to Canada, be it to utilization in the cold and other factors. So this strategy would have to be integrated from mining to recycling for critical minerals. That is, we need an overarching coherent vision that makes it possible to direct investment, and also that will facilitate social acceptability, because these projects are going to be set up in communities. So an overall clear vision will make it much easier to have clear communication. I'll leave Mr. Pivnik a few moments to answer on the next round.
With you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Of course, you have the cough as soon as you need to talk. But no, I want to talk today about the clean energy. I was at an Energy and L conference a few years ago, and a very wise CEO, she came out and she said, we cannot miss out on having a better tomorrow because we're fantasizing about having a perfect tomorrow. And that stuck with me, because I think a lot of times as us Canadians, we kind of sit around boardroom tables and we talk about bringing in solar panels and cutting down the forest and having solar panels, and we almost have a dream of running the world off of smiles and fairy dust. But until we figure out the technologies they used in the Monsters, Inc. movie, we're going to be a long ways from that. So I think what we need to do is take a very common sense approach. If we want to get serious about transitioning globally, I think we actually need to sit down and address what the low-hanging fruits are to transition. And I think that's, kind of a common sense approach by, we eat the elephant one bite at a time and we pick the low-hanging fruit. So, in the world's demand for coal is still increasing as far as I know. The answer every year is which year is the most amount of coal. It seems to be always last year. And, in Canada, we're doing a very good job. Alberta has phased out most of their coal, if not entirely all their coal. I believe most of it is gone now. But and although coal has a very important play in steel manufacturing, it is not the best way, cleanest form of energy. And what we're seeing is globally, the use of coal is still increasing. And we have two issues happening. We have the third world is coming online and getting electrified. And we also have the energy race of needing energy to power AI and kind of entering this kind of Cold War AI race between the geopolitical superpowers of the world. And we come here every week and talk about how energy demands are growing and growing. And I think what we need to be focused on is what is the small steps we can do. I'd like to know if Mr. Pivnik, and I hope I'm not pronouncing that too wrong, could elaborate on how much better our, say, oil and natural gas is here in Canada versus the oil and natural gas in other parts of the world, and how we can use that natural gas to mitigate the coal requirements of the global economy.
Yeah, thanks for the question, and you got the name exactly right. I'm not an expert on oil and gas environmental footprints in comparison there, and I'm not actually in my remarks trying to make a zero-sum argument either, that we need to choose one or the other here in this moment. The trends globally are clear. As I mentioned, two for every dollar that the world this past year spent on energy, $2 were spent on clean energy. So the investments that are happening globally when we're thinking about the energy export markets that Canadian companies and workers can be trying to feed into, that's the trend line. That's true across our allies. That's not to say that oil and gas is going to disappear tomorrow. And that's when it comes to coal, certainly that's not to say that China isn't the largest, overwhelmingly the largest user of that. That all said, if we're trying to have a conversation about where Canada can make investments and position itself in the long run, electrification is coming. And the exact speed of it is something that we should continue to debate. But the trend line is constantly in one direction. And we need to make sure that Canada and Canadian exporters are positioned to play into those markets if we want to have competitive industries and be able to continue to export in a world that is rapidly and accelerating into an electrified energy system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that, going in and electrifying Canada, you said electrification is coming. And I think that is one of our low-hanging fruits. We want to have green energy. We want to have energy across Canada. But how do we do that without interties? And I mean, it's been recommended in this committee in the past to have interties. We had a Liberal government in the past that was very adamant about increasing green energy, but yet nothing was done. And is it because C9 and other requirements were there sorry, not C9, C69 and other requirements that were there for getting these transmission lines from coast to coast? I'd like to know what the hindrance is there of the interties and why this wasn't done already and why we're still talking about it.
Yeah, you just have 30 seconds to respond. Thank you.
Yeah. Quickly, I think the intertie question comes down to a Canadian grid that is truly 10 separate grids, and that's not even counting just the territories either. So we have to have both a provincial and a federal conversation when we're looking at interties. Interregional planning and having clarity around a federal government role that helps balance benefits between jurisdictions with fundamentally different energy systems is going to be a really big key. We seem to have more momentum in this moment than we've ever had for an intertie conversation. I think it'd be a shame if we missed the opportunity in the next few years to really move those tangibly forward, because as you say, they unlock a huge amount of opportunity for Canada.
Thank you both. Mr. Danko, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cote, I'm going to start with you, and I apologize. My questions are going to be in English. I'm not going to torture you with my French or the poor interpreters. But I see in your background there, you've got, I think, is a heat pump. So you're using a high efficiency heating and cooling unit, electric. And we've heard quite a bit about how, the entire world is going to electrification. We've heard that quite a bit from other witnesses, that it's not an ideological choice. It's simply because the technology is better, it's cheaper, it's cleaner, and it is a consumer choice increasingly. So my question to you, you talked about exporting energy and technology. So my question is, when we're talking about on the technology side, how important is it for Canada to embrace this electrical transition, to divest from fossil fuels, so that we can stay at the cutting edge of technology, so that the products that we're making here, our manufacturing sectors, other high technology, advanced manufacturing, are cutting edge, that they're able to stay up to date with the modern trends?
Thank you for your question. Basically what we see is that there's a real opportunity to leverage on current, industries, automotive industries, and we have, steel, and we have aluminum, and we have also a good electricity industry in Canada, on which we can build to make sure that we adopt the technologies of the future, and that we make sure that we have in Canada the capacity to transform and manufacture the technologies that will be required to have a success in terms of energy transition, and also to make sure that we are able to meet electricity demand of the coming 20 years. What we see is really we need somehow a shift, because it's really not a one or it's not a competition against any particular conventional form of energy. It's really efficiency. Electricity. The more electricity you can use, the more efficient it will be. So you have less heat losses and whatnot. So basically, we really need to electrify as much as possible, make sure that the technologies that will be used to do so are as Canadian as possible, and that we leverage our minerals and the natural resources that we have in Canada in terms of moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Pivnik, I'm going to extend that question to you, and I'm going to use a couple Hamilton-specific examples, because you mentioned green steel. ArcelorMittal Dofasco is transitioning to electric arc furnace steel production. We have cutting edge research and development here, developing electric motors that don't use any rare earth materials. So, and that is in production right now. It's a real thing, as well as developing high efficiency batteries, high capacity batteries that don't use critical minerals, cutting edge technology, global leadership. So same question. How important is it for Canada to be on that technological cutting edge so that we have these products available for export, so that we have the IP for these products that we can then export around the world? And how do we make sure that we have access to global markets in terms of federal legislation, things like the industrial carbon price?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think there's a really tight connection between the deployment and adoption of technologies domestically and our ability to excel in them and export it. And I should say in Canada, we often get caught talking about goods, but especially in the electricity sector, in the energy space, the services, the ability to actually package the management of the integration software behind it. This is a very vital and very real and very large part of the economic opportunity for Canada across the energy space. There's a variety of different pieces that we can be doing. And for a lot of households, the barriers are upfront costs. If we can get over the upfront costs, they are able to experience cost savings in the operation of these technologies. We're able to build experience in how to manufacture, how to employ, how to use. This is where we're going to be able to create new companies here domestically. When we look internationally, we do see across all of the trading partners we're looking to diversify trade with, most of them either have carbon pricing in place or are putting in place carbon border adjustments, which is essentially a clean tariff. If your goods are not clean or not manufactured using clean, we're going to ask you to pay a higher price. That's the world we're moving into. So when we think about how we manufacture and leveraging a clean electricity system that is incredibly low carbon intensity to manufacture, we're opening the door to be able to export it. And if we're building that on top of domestic deployment of these technologies and building up the know-how, that's really where we're going to be able to bring these two together.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Mario,
Merci.
2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Mr. Pivnik, I'll come back to you so you can take part in the discussion we were having earlier. With Mr. Coté, I was talking about the possibility of establishing an industrial electrification policy. And in your opening statement, you talked about how volatile fossil fuel prices are. I keep seeing articles that show how China, not because they have a particular interest in climate change, but they are concerned about their energy security, how China is rapidly moving forward with electrification, and they're probably establishing an industrial electrification policy, which is very developed at a number of levels. So if we want to take that route, the best short-term solution would be what? What measures could the government take?
Thank you for the question. I think it's worth pointing out when it comes to the volatile prices, North America can feel like a bit of an island because when you look around the rest of the world, they are responding to this as a transformational moment. The price shocks, the costs to consumers on electricity bills, this is a moment where they are rapidly looking to make massive changes. So I just wanted to highlight that for a moment. When it comes to the industrial policy, we're already seeing right across the board demand for electricity from industries. And let's just take critical minerals. If you talk to the mining sector, they say, give us access to renewables, give us access to low cost, clean electricity to power our mine sites. It means they don't have to import fuel. It means that they can be connected to a reliable electricity grid to power operations. And increasingly that runs the full gamut of the full operations. And that's another space where we see economic opportunities for applying electrified technologies. I'd say we need to, the priority from an industrial electrification strategy is moving to abundance. We have had a bit of a scarcity scarcity mindset when it comes to the electricity system. We build when demand comes. And right now we're in this contest of how much demand and let's build precisely for the moment and not build ahead. That's not what other countries are doing when it comes to securing investments. They're building ahead knowing that demand is on its way, that it's key to attract investment to be able to offer that in advance to secure those investments. That's not an easy gamut, and certainly utilities are going to have to navigate some challenging uncertainty with that. But that's a key piece of being able to unlock a true industrial electrification strategy.
Thank you. Thank you both. Monsieur Martel, 5 minutes.
If you have any written information, I'd very much like to have it.
Submit additional material. We welcome briefs. Thank you so much. Monsieur Martel, 5 minutes.
Oui, merci.
Mr. Martel, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Pivnik. In 2026, Germany is continuing to massively subsidize its electricity industry because of the high costs associated with their energy transition policy. Isn't that a structural limit on a model very dependent on an intermittent energy model with energy sources far from major urban centers?
Thanks for the question. When we look at the EU, they are among the countries, the regions, the trading blocs that are most rapidly trying to embrace electrification. And they're doing so quickly in response to not one, but two global conflicts that have fundamentally changed what they think they can rely on when it comes to their energy supply chains. That rapid shift has all sorts of short-term impacts. They're out looking to meet short-term needs across a wide variety of energy resources. But long-term, they are one of the drivers in the EU pushing for increasing the ambition to develop homegrown energy resources. That's the ability, that's based in renewables, that's looking at battery storage, which to the previous discussion, Canada's falling behind because it's seeing widespread deployment globally and unlocks renewables to an even further degree. I can't speak to the specific subsidization in Germany's electricity sector, but certainly the focus on electrification, the focus on removing their exposure to volatile fossil fuel prices is a priority.
Monsieur Pivnik, dans un scénario
Mr. Pivnik, given the strong increase in Canada's energy demand, how can we exclude natural gas from the energy mix in the next 40 years?
Yeah, I think the way I would put it is Canada should be doing everything it can to maximize the share of new energy demand that it uses renewables, battery storage, and other clean sources to meet. That's going to allow us to be more secure when it comes to building a wind turbine, when it comes to solar power, when it comes to hydro. Those are resources that are accessible here. Those aren't reliant on any global supply chain for the actual power generation aspect. Once we import, and this is a key difference between the clean and conventional supply chains. Conventional, you need the constant import of fuel. When it comes to clean, once the technology is there, it stands for 20 years. So it's not a question of outright and removing every last bit. Natural gas will remain a player in our electricity system, and especially in different regions, increasingly as a backup role. But we really want to take advantage of low-cost, clean options that can lower electricity bills for Canadians as much as possible.
Merci. Monsieur Côté, dans vos micros...
Mr. Cote, in your microgrids combining storage, wind and solar energy, what would really maintain continuity of service when weather conditions are difficult? You're talking about autonomous grids that aren't linked to the national grid. Increasingly, given that standalone networks in Canada aren't that frequent, the point is to reduce the use of diesel generators to a minimum by using wind and solar when it's available and storing that energy. It does reduce the use of diesel. With standalone grids, you can't take advantage of interties with neighboring grids. So diesel remains a requirement to make sure there is a safe and stable supply, but the idea is to minimize recourse to fossil fuels. Mr. Coté, given the realities of Quebec's weather, there are regularly periods of intense energy demand. So is it realistic to have a grid that's, for the most part, based on renewable energy? When we look at Quebec, 87% is renewable. It's a mix of renewable energies. The overall energy portrait, Quebec is still using fossil fuel energy for 55% of its energy needs, particularly in transport. But there are opportunities to reduce GHG emissions. And sometimes, yes, they do need to import petrol, to import oil, gas, gasoline. So electrification would mean increasing renewable energy sources.
Mr. Saini, welcome to the committee, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. Being a British Columbia MP, I'm going to ask this to Mr. Pivnik. The Northwest Transmission Line, which has been proposed as one of the major projects, is going to go to the area where we have a lot of critical minerals. Besides creating a lot of jobs, could I hear your viewpoint? How is it going to help what we are trying to accomplish in this process?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think we talked a lot previously about the interties between provinces, but inside an individual province, transmission infrastructure is just as vital. That transmission line unlocks an incredible opportunity called the Golden Triangle, for those not from or living in BC, in Northwest BC, that holds significant opportunity to provide critical minerals and opens up new mines that have been on hold and looking for electricity for a long time. As we talked about actually with the industrial electricity strategy, the ability to provide mines with electricity is one of the precursors to unlocking the investment in those mines. And I've actually seen them standing up and being able to provide. So transmission infrastructure is absolutely vital to seeing those investments move forward in BC.
The Government of Canada has announced one major project office to take care of the major infrastructure or project we are going to. Do you see that a major step rather than the provincial governments and several different groups trying to approve those projects?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it represents an opportunity to prioritize with finite resources, being able to move decisively forward key projects. I think we would be highlighting the need for those projects to represent clean growth sectors for the economy. As we've mentioned, if we're looking from an energy exports perspective, the ability to make sure that what Canadians are increasingly able to bring to market is where and what our trading partners are looking for, especially as we seek to diversify trade beyond the United States. That's where electrification is really taking off there.
Recent trip to India, we have made some decision on nuclear energy technology to be sold to India. Do you think that will help the world to clean up from the coal that has been talked about as one of the difficulties that we are facing?
Certainly, nuclear energy represents sort of one of the key areas where Canada has competitive advantages, has expertise, and can be exporting and exporting not just goods, but actually the services, the ability to stand up and manage and operate these facilities. I think that's going to end up being one of the key opportunities here. It's as with any of the clean options here, it's no silver bullet. It alone will not answer the need. And when it comes to low cost, we really should, certainly domestically, but also when we look at what the rest of the world is deploying, renewables, battery storage, these are where countries are going to be looking to maximize because of the speed at which they can be stood up and the cost at which they can generate electricity. So looking at how we can play into those supply chains should also be a priority. But certainly nuclear has a role to play, especially from an energy exports perspective.
120. Canada Green Home Affordability Program. I think it's been done by some provinces, but it's not something that is across Canada. What can the federal government help so this is available throughout Canada and every province is able to take part in it? Either one of you can.
This was the Greener Homes Affordability Program?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so this goes back to the ability to deploy to ensure that Canadian households can take advantage of the cost savings from clean energy technologies, being able to see this will help drive manufacturing, this will help drive jobs and installation, this will build Canadian know-how and experience in this. This will also be a resource that will be able to be increasingly leveraged by utilities to reduce costs elsewhere in the system. From the federal government's perspective, making sure that it is supporting electrified technologies. We should be looking at electric heat pumps as much as possible, or at minimum hybrid. That's going to be absolutely essential for many regions. That's going to be an opportunity and the ability for the federal government to help ensure households can get over the upfront costs that technologies are involved so that they can take advantage of the cost savings of operating these systems is going to be absolutely vital.
Well, thank you, Mr. Saini, and thank you to our witnesses. That was a lively exchange between members of Parliament. We appreciate you being with us. And as Mr. Simard mentioned, we welcome briefs. We welcome additional information if you'd like to submit it to the clerk. And with that, colleagues, we are going to break while we prepare for our next panel. We'll suspend for 5 minutes. members.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but and it's good to be back. So we'll resume the meeting, and we have new witnesses. I'll welcome them on your behalf, colleagues. From the Hydrogen Alliance, Derek Easterbrook, Executive Director, and from the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, Brent Lakeman, Executive Director. All witnesses, as I've said before, have conducted a mandatory witness onboarding test. And let me make a few comments for the benefit of the new witnesses. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair, and you will each have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, after which we will open the floor to questions. And Mr. Easterbrook, we're going to start with you. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm Derek Easterbrook, Executive Director of the Atlantic Hydrogen Alliance. Thank you for the opportunity to offer my remarks about the role that low-carbon hydrogen exports from Atlantic Canada can play in Canada's energy export strategy. Canada is fortunate to have an abundance of what much of the world needs, which is a diverse mix of clean and conventional energy resources. In the wake of recent energy shocks, including Russia's continued aggression in Ukraine and hostilities in Iran, energy security and supply resilience have become defining priorities for our European allies. They're looking for stable, reliable, long-term energy partners like Canada. So this is our hydrogen moment. The global energy transition is accelerating, and our allies in Western Europe are building the infrastructure to support growing hydrogen demand, like ports, ammonia crackers, hydrogen pipelines, and hydrogen fueling stations. Atlantic Canada is well positioned to meet that demand. Our ice-free deepwater ports offer direct access to European markets. Our region is geographically closer to Hamburg, Germany than to Calgary. Atlantic Canada has abundant onshore and offshore wind resources, and while we can't ship wind across the Atlantic, we can convert it into green hydrogen and its derivatives like ammonia, methanol, and sustainable aviation fuel that can be shipped. Decades of expertise and experience in offshore energy, hydropower, and refining have built the expertise and industrial foundation that translate directly into the emerging hydrogen sector. Policy environment in Europe is also beginning to align. Earlier this year, the European Commission approved a double auction mechanism administered through H2 Global to support the production and export of renewable hydrogen, including hydrogen derivatives from Canada to Germany. This approval unlocks matching support from the Government of Canada, bringing combined funding to over $600 million. The H2 Global mechanism is designed to bridge the price gap between what Canadian producers need to make their projects financially viable and what European buyers are currently prepared to pay. The program is expected to kickstart our green hydrogen export sector and support up to 300 megawatts of hydrogen electrolysis capacity in Canada. Also, Germany's parliament recently amended its GHG reduction legislation to set binding quotas for renewable fuels, including hydrogen and its derivatives, in the transportation sector. This creates real, durable demand. And Canadian hydrogen exporters are really well placed to help close the gap between that demand and Germany's own domestic production capacity. I also want to address what some may see as slowing momentum in the hydrogen sector. While the pace of hydrogen development has moderated recently, the direction hasn't changed. The International Energy Agency's 2025 Global Hydrogen Review confirms that the number of projects reaching a final investment decision grew by nearly 20% last year. Installed electrolyzer capacity has increased ninefold since 2021, and global hydrogen investment has grown from under $500 million in 2021 to nearly $8 billion in 2025, and is projected to grow fivefold by 2030. And this trajectory mirrors the early scaling curves of solar, wind, and lithium-ion batteries, technologies that also required sustained government support before achieving commercial viability. I think we have to remember that lesson. Green hydrogen is an immature but strategically important sector that requires targeted, sustained policy support during the critical early development years. There are several large-scale green hydrogen projects here in Atlantic Canada that are focused on exporting hydrogen and derivatives to Western Europe, and they're at various stages of development across our region. The funding from the upcoming Canada-Germany hydrogen auction is an important start, but to move shovel-ready projects to final investment decision, sustained support programs are necessary. So in conclusion, the hydrogen export opportunity is real, and the conditions for success are well aligned. And we have favorable geography, abundant resources, and willing producers and off-takers on both sides of the Atlantic. Now we need the policy and funding support to bring them together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Easterbrook. Mr. Lakeman, you're now up for 5 minutes.
Great, and good afternoon. Bonjour. My name is Brent Lakeman. I'm the Executive Director of the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, and I would like to thank the Standing Committee for this opportunity to contribute to your deliberations on the topic of energy exports. While I recognize the scope of the committee is significantly broader than just the exports of clean fuels like hydrogen, it is important for the committee to have an appreciation of the challenges and opportunities related to the export of hydrogen to global markets, which was identified in the Canadian Hydrogen Strategy. The Edmonton region of Canada plays a very strategic role in Canada's hydrogen economy. Our region has been producing hydrogen for heavy industry applications like oil refining and upgrading, chemicals production, and fertilizer production for over 30 years. The Edmonton region is home to world-leading low-carbon hydrogen production projects, starting with the Quest project, which was supported by federal and provincial governments more than 10 years ago. Through projects like this, our region's leaders identified the opportunity we have to play in a major role in the future hydrogen economy. Their vision positioned our region as home to Canada's first hydrogen hub over 5 years ago. So since then, the region has seen final investment decisions being made on some of the largest low-carbon hydrogen production projects in the world. These projects are enabled by Canada's low-cost natural gas, our carbon capture, utilization, and storage infrastructure, and our experienced and innovative workforce. The Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub looks to build on this track record by creating the conditions to accelerate the use of hydrogen across a diverse range of sectors, including commercial and municipal fleets, heat and power opportunities, and emerging industries. The hub serves as an ecosystem convener, as a systems integrator, and as a policy advocate. Our partners are the economic development agencies from the region, the Alberta Industrial Heartland Association and Edmonton Global, but also the Edmonton International Airport, which is advancing hydrogen use across the airport ecosystem, and Alberta Innovates. Our mandate is on building enabling conditions for increased hydrogen use within the Edmonton region across a range of sectors, and we will also work closely with our partners to connect domestic producers to export markets. The hub realizes that to de-risk future investments in hydrogen supply and demand, exports need to be part of the equation, just as domestic use of hydrogen are critical for de-risking international export projects. Several hydrogen companies have also explored the production of hydrogen for export markets. Over the past 7 to 8 years, the focus has been on the conversion of the hydrogen into low-carbon ammonia or blue ammonia to serve Japanese and South Korean markets. These projects were being explored with key players from these markets, such as Japanese trading houses, as well as power production companies looking to blend ammonia into their generation facilities in Asia. These ammonia export projects, however, have not proceeded due to the complexities and costs associated with transporting ammonia safely out of our region by rail to the port of Prince Rupert. Ammonia, however, is just one pathway for export of our region's clean fuels. Leading global companies like Kawasaki Heavy Industries believe liquid hydrogen has several advantages over other clean fuels like ammonia, and they're developing the technologies needed to ship liquid hydrogen across the Pacific Ocean. They're also developing the technologies needed to move liquid hydrogen from the point of production, like the Edmonton region, to the Pacific Coast ports. In fact, just last week at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention in Edmonton, Kawasaki entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, Alberta's Industrial Heartland Association, and Edmonton Global to explore how we can put in place the critical infrastructure to get some of the world's lowest cost, low carbon hydrogen to the markets that need it the most. Realizing this opportunity, which is intended to serve the post-2035 Japanese market, requires that we start preparing today. Today, we're realizing the benefits of the LNG investments that started in the 1980s to build the specialized ships and port infrastructure needed to move this product. Establishing the necessary hydrogen supply chain infrastructure from point of production to our export terminals will also take time and require strong and coordinated support from government and industry. Before concluding, I would like to highlight other ways that hydrogen hubs can play or can support the export of cleaner fuels to global markets. Well, we need to get our products to export terminals on the West Coast, the East Coast, and eventually even northern ports like Churchill. We also need to ensure our shipping of products to these ports by trucks and by trains is also undertaken in a low-carbon manner. The Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub is working with other hubs to make these connections to ensure our transportation corridors can utilize hydrogen and other clean fuels. We launched a Western Canada Hydrogen Corridors initiative to do just that. The hub is working with global leaders like Hyundai Motor Company to bring their fuel cell truck technologies to our major transportation corridors. We're working with Canada's CPKC to show that Canada's Ballard fuel cells can be used to decarbonize freight rail. And we're bringing hydrogen diesel dual fuel technologies developed by Edmonton-based Diesel Tech Industries onto Canadian highways, offering an innovative and low-cost alternative for getting hydrogen used by our transportation fleets. In closing, Canada is being identified by leading hydrogen-consuming nations like Japan and Korea to be a supplier of their energy needs. Today and in the future, hydrogen will play a key role in global market segments like transportation and heavy industry, and it will also play a role in how we get our products across Canada so they can be sent to export markets with a low carbon intensity footprint. Hydrogen hubs can play a key role in helping to de-risk hydrogen projects, identify future demand, and ensure Canada is working to advance critical enabling infrastructure. I appreciate having the opportunity to speak to the Standing Committee and would be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lakeman. Now we will begin our round of questions for the second panel. And Mr. Rowe, we're going to start with you for 6 minutes.
All righty, thank you. I think my first question, I'll start it close to home for Mr. Estabrook. And, Germany came to Newfoundland a few years ago, and Canada and Germany jointly pledged $600 million to a hydrogen project, wind turbine hydrogen project. But lately I've been seeing some CBC articles that are saying they're actually waiting on more federal funding decisions for exporting hydrogen. I'm just curious, is that federal funding decisions do we need it from this government, or is Germany also going to be pitching in? And should Canadian government be subsidizing energy for other nations? It kind of seems a little bit backwards to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So first of all, I'll clarify I believe the $600 million that you're referencing is the money that Germany and Canada committed to the H2 Global auction. So this is a two-sided auction process where the German government and the Canadian government back in 2024 each committed approximately $300 million in funding to essentially be a contract for difference. So the way this auction will work is that green hydrogen export project developers in Canada will be able to bid in, and the suppliers that bid in the lowest price will be successful in that auction. Then a second auction will happen in Germany for customers for that green hydrogen or its derivatives. And the customers who bid the highest amount will be successful. And the money in the $600 million pot will be used to bridge that gap between the lowest supply price and the highest demand price. So that is the way that the auction is intended to work.
Right.
I think the second part of your question was, should Canada be subsidizing energy that's going to Germany? And I think that's an important question.
Yeah.
The way that I would frame this is money will sort of kickstart the green hydrogen export sector in Canada. So it's an important investment to get the market or get the early market developed. And the goal is that once the market gets going, it becomes self-sustaining. But like the wind industry and the solar industry and the battery industry, it's hard to get these markets going quickly enough and scaling up rapidly enough to become self-sustaining without that initial support.
And we see that in other industries, and we see that in mining and in oil and gas. But where I see the difference is and I'm hoping someone's going to prove me wrong, I don't think we're getting any royalties off of the hydrogen that's produced off of wind turbines or solar farms. We're not getting any royalties from that as a federal government to actually pay down those initial incentives. So I don't understand how the Canadian taxpayer is actually going to gain anything by subsidizing the industry that's providing energy to foreign nations. So, but I'll leave that there. I do have a question now a little bit farther away from Mr. Lakeman. I went to the Energy Expo in Edmonton. And boy, there's a lot of excitement. Big things are happening in Alberta with hydrogen. I seen trucks there, diesel trucks, that they actually had the diesel engine converted to take hydrogen. You know, a lot of other stuff that was there for that. It's amazing. It always surprises me how the province that has the most oil and gas and the most natural gas use their resources to actually be the leaders in hydrogen. And it surprises me that all these other provinces in Canada, the ones that often scream the loudest about the environment, the ones that scream the loudest about wanting against oil and gas, against the oil sands, they have not done what you guys have done in Alberta to lead that way. And that's, to me, a little bit hypocritical, but I think it's amazing you guys have done that. And I'd like for you to perhaps expand on where you guys see yourself in the next few years.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we're in a very fortunate position in Alberta, in our part of Alberta, particularly the Edmonton region. We do provide the vast majority of certainly of Alberta's hydrogen that's being produced. And Alberta is by far the largest producer in Canada when you look at the industries that it supports. So our advantage is we have the large industrial offtake right there. So that's the starting point. Industries that need hydrogen for their processing, and now increasingly low carbon hydrogen when you couple it with the carbon capture and storage opportunities and the experience we have now. We've been doing it for 10 years at a commercial scale, and not many parts of the world can say that. So I think we're very proud of that. And we're continuing to improve. I think that's the other part of it is, technologies that were put in place 10 years ago are wonderful, but they're improving and we're doing better and better. So now it's about unlocking new markets for the hydrogen. And I think that's where there's some challenges, of course, in how we unlock those markets in new sectors, heavy duty transportation. What is the driver for it? So we're spending a lot of time looking at that. And, what is the role of government as we advance hydrogen use applications? And I think maybe the point is, to advance this industry, which I think Canada has a huge opportunity. Certainly my part of Canada does. What's that coordinated process? We do have incentives that are very strong in Alberta, federal incentives and provincial incentives. But we also need the certainty. What does that carbon market look like as you advance hydrogen use in new sectors? It is somewhat dependent on carbon policies and things like the Canada-Alberta MOU. That plays a critical role in moving things forward. So we have the certainty, so we understand what is the value of carbon credits as we move forward. So I think we see huge opportunity for Canada, huge opportunities for Edmonton, not just in heavy industry applications, but as we look at new applications, you even move into new areas like data centers and defense.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Thank you, Mr. Lakeman. Mr. Hogan, 6 minutes. Starting now.
Thank you, Chair. I was waiting for my microphone. I could have done it myself. I was showing a certain amount of laziness there. I apologize. Mr. Estabrook, I know you said your region is closer to Hamburg than Calgary geographically, but on behalf of Calgarians, let me just say we hold you closer, and we feel grateful to share so many bonds with your region. And of course, one of those bonds is that both of our regions have immense opportunity for hydrogen. Canadians have an abundance of energy options. And of course, there's not going to be one winner in the energy conversation. I think that is something we hear time and time again at this committee, something I certainly agree. And there will be different solutions for different use cases. And so Mr. Lakeman began to go down this road. I'd like to ask you both, and maybe we'll start with you, Mr. Estabrook. I'm wondering for our report, if you can expand on some of the use cases hydrogen is best situated for.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say, I assume you're asking about use cases both in Canada and in export markets?
Yeah, absolutely. And because, of course, this is an export study, I might even be, for the purposes of this conversation, export focused.
The good news is, I think the best applications in other parts of the world are the same applications as in Canada. I think any jurisdiction globally that has ambitious emission reduction goals is going to need other sources of clean energy besides electricity. And so the sectors that are the best use cases for low carbon hydrogen and its derivatives are heavy transportation, as Mr. Lakeman mentioned. Hydrogen fuel cells provide long-haul trucks with the amount of torque and range and short refueling times that are required for those long distances, as well as other types of heavy long-haul transportation. So you think trains, marine vessels, especially large ones. Once you get beyond the range of what you can realistically achieve with a lithium-ion battery, hydrogen fuel cells become very important. So that's one sector. A little bit further down the road as well is the aviation sector. While it may be possible to decarbonize some small short-haul flights with battery electric technologies, for long-haul flights, like I think across the ocean, we're likely going to need some combination of sustainable aviation fuel, which is made from hydrogen, and or fuel cells. There's actually an organization in Canada called H2 Can Fly that has support from several large players in the aviation sector that's doing work in that area right now to figure out how to decarbonize aviation. Another important sector is industrial applications, especially heavy industry that needs high temperatures. So I think whenever you need combustion to make things like steel or bricks or aluminum, that's very difficult to do with electricity. You really need to combust something, and that's why natural gas or even coal is important in that sector. But long term, you can burn green hydrogen or blue hydrogen for those types of industrial facilities.
Thank you. I want to give Mr. Lakeman a chance to get in. Also, I'll just congratulate you, Mr. Lakeman, while I have the mic on the MOU with Kawasaki. I think it's another example of it being an exciting time to be in energy in Canada right now. And I'm wondering if you can answer that question, maybe also throw in your view of, because you talked a bit about markets and how we can serve markets. What are those markets looking for as well? What are they looking for? Are we competing on price? Are we competing on carbon? How do you see that evolving in the future as well?
Sure, yeah, happy to. And Mr. Estabrooks gave a great overview, I think, of the key end-use sectors for hydrogen. I can't add a lot. I mean, we certainly have been starting with heavy industry, again, refining, chemical production, where it's already been used, again, for decades and decades. Then we'd look at new sectors, new industrial sectors as well. Mentioned sustainable aviation fuels, glass, cement. Those are a couple other ones. We don't necessarily have, we have a cement plant that's decarbonizing, but not through hydrogen, but through carbon capture and storage. But in other jurisdictions, that may be the case, glass manufacturing as well. A couple that didn't get mentioned were, you may have mentioned rail, but certainly rail's been a big success story here with the CPKC locomotive program, starting in Edmonton and Calgary, expanding across British Columbia, I think now expanding into the United States. So that's kind of an ideal heavy-duty transportation application for hydrogen that we can build off of for sure. A couple that weren't mentioned, the defense sector. We know the defense is looking at its own energy requirements, and it thinks hydrogen can play a very significant role, but some unique applications around drone technologies, other military applications. So I think, again, some of the Canadian hydrogen expertise could well be applied into defense. Data centers, that probably still seem to be a little on the expensive side to use hydrogen, but I think there may be some niche applications for hydrogen with data centers, particularly for the backup power requirements that a data center may have. So I think those are just some additional ones to round it out. your question was on the markets internationally. We're certainly focused mainly on the Asian markets, really Japan and Korea and South Korea. And, they certainly want a secure, stable provider. So I think that's the main comment I would make is security of supply.
Thanks so much. Monsieur Simard, 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, mon ami.
Mr. Simard, 6 minutes. Thank you. I just want to ensure that our witnesses are hearing the interpretation properly and not my rather stuffed up nasal tones. I'd like to begin with a friendly question, Mr. Easterbrook, and perhaps a rather friendly correction. In your answer, you said that some industrial sectors need hydrogen in their processes, and you mentioned aluminium, saying that electricity did not produce enough heat. In Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, there's been aluminium smelting for over 100 years. So the electrolysis process is possible with aluminium. I'm open to hydrogen use. I've had numerous discussion with former Natural Resources Minister Wilkinson. And we'd had a meeting with people from Siemens who said that perhaps governments might be ready to accept the higher production cost by subsidizing the higher production cost, and that might be a useful thing to do. You talked about your auctions. I understand that markets need to be developed, but the Siemens people told us that there's something the governments will never want to take on. It's the technology cost, technological cost. In Siemens' view, it wouldn't be possible to produce hydrogen with carbon capture and storage technology, because along with the hydrogen manufacture, they'd be a carbon capture and storage. So if you look at the production and technology costs, they would collectively be too high to make hydrogen a really profitable energy source or cost-efficient, cost-effective energy source. What is your view?
Well, I don't want to put Mr. Lakeman on the spot, but given that your question was specifically about carbon capture and storage associated with blue hydrogen production, that's not an area where Atlantic Canada has had much focus. Our focus has been almost exclusively on the production of green hydrogen through
Désolé,
electrolysis.
je suis maladroit. Je peux peut-être laisser M. Lakeman répondre là-dessus.
I'm sorry. I'm not thinking straight. Perhaps Mr. Lakeman could answer?
To take a try. Carbon capture and storage or blue hydrogen. That's how we're seeing not all of the hydrogen being produced in our region, but it's the significant majority of it. That would be probably considered the most low-cost way to get to a low-carbon hydrogen outcome. So I think we're very fortunate having the world-class geology within the Western Canada Sedimentary Basin. I have been involved in studies that have looked at other parts of Canada and the storage potential, which does exist. It exists in Ontario. It exists in parts of Quebec, is my understanding, as well as Atlantic Canada, but not necessarily with the maturity, with all the characterization that has been done. And that's really important as we move towards these projects, is really having that deep understanding of the geology, which, you're going down 2 kilometers and having it actively characterized. So again, I think that's the starting point. And we're seeing some technology innovation, as I mentioned as well, and being able to understand the geology, understand how carbon capture can work using AI technologies, for example, and continuing to drive down the cost, because I think it was mentioned earlier, that's really what the market is also looking for, is the low-cost hydrogen. They're somewhat agnostic on whether it comes from blue, green, any other color of the rainbow, but they are looking for carbon reductions.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Easterbrook. I could come back to the previous discussion. I see 2 main challenges. One is infrastructure, 2 is export. People with whom I've discussed hydrogen said that First of all, the best solution would be to work in short loops where you are using it in a grid that's close to production. So before even thinking about export, should we not be thinking of developing infrastructure to use hydrogen in short loops?
Mr. Chair, and you are correct. The cost to transport hydrogen is quite expensive, and so using it as close to the source of production is optimal. I would also say, though, that exporting hydrogen and using it domestically are not mutually exclusive. I think there are opportunities to do both successfully. I reference the Canso Strait area in Nova Scotia, which is very close to the proposed location for Everwind Fuels, green ammonia export project, as well as Nova Sustainable Fuels, sustainable aviation fuel project. So while these projects are focused on producing hydrogen derivatives for export, once they are in production, there are local industries who can also use those sources of hydrogen. So the Strait of Canso region specifically has just completed a feasibility study to determine how hydrogen and its derivatives can be used in that local area. In the Strait of Canso, there's a coal-fired power generating station. There's a wallboard plant. Port Hawkesbury Paper has a large pulp and paper facility there. They are all very large energy users who could really benefit from that hydrogen. And frankly, they would be able to benefit from a lower cost to use that hydrogen than that same hydrogen that's converted to ammonia and then exported.
Thank you both. Monsieur Martel, 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Martel, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Easterbrook, at present, in the current economic situation, can hydrogen really be competitive without massive public support?
Mr. Chair, for the question. It depends on what you mean by compete. If you mean, can it compete with legacy fossil fuels, either oil or natural gas? I think the answer to that question is, in the short term, no. However, for jurisdictions that are focused on rapid decarbonization, we can only get so far with electricity directly. And if we want to decarbonize sectors that are difficult to decarbonize with electricity, we're going to have to look at other options. And hydrogen and its derivatives becomes the best option for some of these other sectors. Secondly, I would say in many parts of the world, so the 80% of countries in the world that are dependent on imported fossil fuels, energy security and resiliency is almost more important than decarbonization for them right now. So they are really aggressively looking at how they can either diversify away from imported fossil fuels or over the longer term transition away from them. So similarly, they're not so much looking at what's the cost of a barrel of oil or a gigajoule of natural gas. They're saying if those aren't viable options, either for energy security reasons or for emission reduction reasons, they're really only looking at what is the best low carbon option. And in many sectors, hydrogen and its derivatives is their best option.
Oui, Monsieur Easterbrook.
Mr. Easterbrook, Canada has signed hydrogen export agreements with Germany with deadlines that are coming up fairly soon, but no significant volumes have been delivered. What are the main barriers to getting there? What's the obstacle?
question. Broadly speaking, the biggest obstacle is that the key markets for green hydrogen exports from Atlantic Canada are in Western Europe. So countries like Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium, they want green hydrogen, but not at any price. So price has become a key barrier, at least in the short term. And that's specifically what the Canada-Germany hydrogen auction is intended to address by enabling large off-takers in Germany to purchase hydrogen derivatives at a cost that they can justify. So that's this green or the Canada-Germany hydrogen auction through H2 Global is really a critical policy mechanism to kickstart the sector and get it going.
Ouais. Ben alors, est-ce que ça remet en question la viabilité?
So does that bring into question the viability of the supply chains in the short term?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think like most emerging energy sectors, they require support to get off the ground because the economics are challenging until you achieve economies of scale and the technology gets better. And that's where we are with the hydrogen sector today. It's where the wind and solar industries were 15 or 20 years ago. So I don't see this sector as being different. In order to get the cost down, we have to be prepared to start relatively small and provide the support required to make projects economical. And then as we start to scale, the costs will come down. Also, it's important to remember that for green hydrogen production, about 2/3 of the cost of hydrogen production is the cost of the renewable electricity. So as the cost of onshore wind and solar and other types of renewable energy comes down, that feedstock that goes into the hydrogen production also comes down, which automatically makes the cost of green hydrogen production significantly lower.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Easterbrook. And Ms. McKelvey, welcome to the committee, and you're up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was put on Natural Resources Committee, my first thought was, I hope we talk about hydrogen. And lo and behold, day number 1, we're talking about hydrogen. So very excited by the possibilities that are around that, and that we have witnesses here from the East Coast specializing in green hydrogen, and from more of Western Canada specializing in blue hydrogen. And I will note that I think it's unfortunate we don't have anybody from the critical minerals industry really in Ontario and nuclear industry that can really speak to more of that white type hydrogen produced by radiolysis that we have both in the reactors and deep inside the earth. So hopefully we can get some submissions written that are submitted in that regard. With that, Mr. Easterbrook, you did a great job summarizing some of the potential uses for hydrogen, both within industry. Also, we do know that with the pathways to net zero, heavy-duty vehicles, airplanes, they're going to be some of the hardest to decarbonize and move forward on. So there's a lot of opportunity there. But I'm really hoping you could, big picture, speak to what are the opportunities that we have for green hydrogen in Nova Scotia through the Atlantic, and really in particular alongside the Wind West project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. So you're asking about Nova Scotia specifically, not other regions of Atlantic Canada. Okay.
Mr. Easterbrook, we're just going to pause you for a second there. We're having a little audio problem. Are we okay?
Not much you can do, maybe unplug and replug. Is that okay?
Keep going?
No, plug and unplug and plug is
Mr. Easterbrook, can you plug and unplug? No, unplug and then plug.
Okay.
your mic, because you were. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
He does good.
Okay.
Yeah. He does.
Thank you.
Is that better?
That's okay on my end.
Thank you, colleagues, for your patience. Go ahead. We stopped your clock.
So the province of Nova Scotia, like the federal government, has a target to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. In order to achieve that target, we're going to have to decarbonize almost every energy use sector, including the ones we've talked about. We also have heavy transportation, we have trains, we have a significant marine sector in Nova Scotia, especially in the fishing and seafood sectors. And many of those larger commercial fishing vessels will be very difficult to decarbonize with batteries alone for a whole bunch of reasons that I won't get into right now. But safe to say, we will need other forms of low carbon energy, whether it could be hydrogen fuel cells. It can also be low carbon liquid fuels that are derived from hydrogen, like green methanol, which would be a very good option in a container ship or a ferry. So those sectors are going to be important. And while we don't have a significant industrial base in Nova Scotia compared to some other parts of Canada, we do have some heavy industries here, and they will also need to decarbonize. So the energy applications that need to be decarbonized in Nova Scotia, the rest of Canada, and globally are generally the same. The only difference in Nova Scotia is it's a smaller province, so the magnitude is a little bit lower, which in some ways makes Nova Scotia an attractive place to start. Because, for example, we can develop a relatively small, heavy trucking hydrogen corridor, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Also, I just want to come back to a point that Mr. Lakeman made about the defense sector. The defense sector is very important in Nova Scotia. It's home to the East Coast Navy. It will be home to the new Canada Patrol submarines. And those submarines, when they're operating underwater in stealth mode, will operate on hydrogen fuel cells. So Nova Scotia will have to start developing the hydrogen supply chain that will be required in the defense sector. So that as well is an important opportunity here.
Got about a minute.
So maybe can you speak to, though, the production of hydrogen and the opportunities that are available through Nova Scotia, in particular with new projects like Wind West, other sources of electricity that you have coming online that can help you really to ramp up this production, both for domestic as well as export?
In the short term, I'd say over the next 10 years or so, I think almost all of the renewable electricity used in the production of green hydrogen for domestic use and export will come from onshore wind, not offshore wind. And that's purely economic. You can produce onshore wind for $60 or $70 per megawatt hour, and the cost of offshore wind is likely to be 2 or 3 times that cost. And given that renewable electricity is the #1 input cost in the green hydrogen production, I think it's going to be 10 or 20 years or more before it's economical to produce green hydrogen here with offshore wind.
Thank you. Thank you both. Monsieur Simard, 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Mr. Simard, 2.5 minutes. Thank you. I'll come back to the conversation we had a few minutes ago. You said we need to think about energy technologies in the longer term, and I agree. Before we have sufficient wind energy to really deploy. Because in the manufacture of hydrogen, there is a significant loss. You need a lot of wind energy to produce green hydrogen, and that'll take time. But if I go back to the discussions I've had with other people, what's crucial is developing the market. If we want to do that in the short term, we'll need some kind of infrastructure, even if it's in small areas. So what kind of infrastructure should we be developing as quickly as possible to facilitate hydrogen use?
Assume the question is directed to me, Mr. Chair. Okay. You're raising a really important challenge in that, unlike electricity, where the value chain has existed for 100 years or more, in the hydrogen sector, for generally speaking, at least in Atlantic Canada, the hydrogen supply chain does not exist yet. So in order to develop a project, at minimum, you need hydrogen production. Then you need a way to transport the hydrogen from the point of production to the point of end use. And we've already talked about the importance of trying to make that distance as short as possible. If it's going into the transportation sector, then you need refueling stations to put the hydrogen into the vehicles, and then you may also need hydrogen storage. So it's complex, it's expensive, and you have to build that value chain, every link of that value chain simultaneously, because you can't put a truck on the road using hydrogen either in a dual fuel vehicle or in a fuel cell until you build that entire value chain. So it is one of the biggest challenges that the sector faces globally and here.
Thank you. And Mr. Ruff, welcome to the committee. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Question to both of you. A couple years ago, I was meeting with the Canadian Hydrogen Association. I'm assuming you're both members. And one of the main asks in 2024 was an update on the national hydrogen strategy. When I go online, the last thing I can find is from 2 years ago, the sort of progress report. So I guess my question to both of you is, considering the rapid changes and in evolution and in your sector as you're emerging, are you still seeking any clarity from the Government of Canada or any updates on the national hydrogen strategy?
You can both answer.
Maybe I'd be happy to start out. Maybe I think it's very important that we have supportive federal programs. I think we certainly will work closely with the Canadian Hydrogen Association on their submissions. One of the points that I think we've made in the past has been, we focus a lot on some of the production incentives, and that's certainly important. But it's still the early days, and we're working to develop markets, including being ready for the export markets, but making sure we have demand-based incentives as well for these earlier projects. And in some cases, that might be much less costly to government because it is very much the early days, but we do still need some support, whether it's the trucking corridors to use the hydrogen fuel cell or dual cell vehicles or other end users. So I think that's maybe one of the messages. We have great incentives today, but sometimes they're a little more focused on the production side. And we also need to focus on the end use side because that's the benefits of production don't always get passed through to the end user, as we've seen in the transportation sector.
And I would add that I think the strategy should more explicitly reference the export opportunity and clarify that we talk a lot about hydrogen, but from an export standpoint, it's really a feedstock that gets converted into ammonia or methanol or sustainable aviation fuel. So I think we really need the strategy should really clearly outline the role of those fuels. And I don't believe that the hydrogen strategy referenced the defense sector or the important role that hydrogen can play in energy security at all when it was developed. And it's because those important opportunities have really evolved significantly over the last couple of years.
Thank you. I'll turn to you now, Mr. Estabrook, specifically because of green hydrogen. I have hydrogen optimized in my riding. I'm assuming you're aware of who they are. And, huge potential there in that organization to be a world leader with their rugged cell water electrolysis system up to the gigawatts scale. So, but one of the challenges I know is obviously green hydrogen, the electrolysis process, that amount of energy you need to produce green hydrogen. And so I know you talked about wind. I know specifically the last time I talked to that company, they were talking of potential partnering opportunities down on the East Coast. Because you can turn that into ammonia, you can transport that, because it basically stores it. But can you speak a little bit more about the energy requirements, not only from wind, but nuclear as well? Because in my neck of the woods, we got Bruce Power, nuclear facilities. The problem with nuclear energy, they're producing it all, but again, how do you store that? And I think converting it is an option, but where are we sitting on that?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. From an energy standpoint, you need 50 to 60 kilowatt hours of electricity to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen through electrolysis. And where those kilowatt hours of electricity come from doesn't matter. Like an electron is an electron. So whether that electron is produced from coal, nuclear, wind, solar, hydro, it all works the same in the electrolyzer. The challenge is if you want the hydrogen to be clean, the electricity has to be clean. So it can be wind, can be solar, can be hydro. Nuclear is also another interesting option because it is baseload power. And so using any surplus nuclear power production capacity, especially late at night, could be a very attractive option in the provinces that have that available as baseload power.
Thank you. Mr. Gay, you're going to wrap us up with 5 minutes.
All right, Mr. Lakeman. The Spring Economic Update proposed making enhanced oil recovery an eligible use under the Carbon Capture, Utilization and Storage, ITC. So recognizing that in clean hydrogen carbon intensity calculation, how does this change your hub's project mix or economics if you're taking that into consideration? Can it make your activities even more financeable or viable? And can it help Canada overall being more competitive?
Sure. Yeah, I think the changes to allow for enhanced oil recovery will be a positive net impact on the sector as it moves forward, certainly for the CCUS sector. And that's really the U is the utilization, and having a revenue stream really will support these projects, because one of the challenges that we've seen has been you do need that carbon credit value to be, up to that significant level, probably over $100, over $130. So if you can achieve some additional revenue stream from the utilization, and if that could be, put towards the overall project economics, that's a good thing. The hydrogen projects that are underway, under construction currently in our region, are using CO2 hubs. So those are not EOR hubs; those are for straight CO2 storage. So I can't comment on whether any of that these recent developments will change the strategies of those hydrogen companies to work with those hubs for the long-term storage. But again, I think with EOR demonstrating that CO2, some of it does get recycled, but ultimately, if we can store that in that geological formation during and after the EOR project, then it will have a very positive outcome.
We can end with a question to both of you. Part of our automotive strategy included $1.5 billion for charging and hydrogen refueling infrastructure initiative. And that includes building of additional hydrogen charging stations. So do you feel that this sends a signal that the Canadian government's serious about hydrogen and the increasing demand for it, and help us become a serious hydrogen producer? So maybe ask Mr. Estabrook if you want to start.
Oh. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Yes. I mean, in order to deploy trucks or other commercial vehicles like buses with either hydrogen fuel cells or dual fuel engines, you need the refueling infrastructure. You need those state stations. What's interesting about hydrogen is the best applications are in heavy transportation, not in passenger vehicles or light duty vehicles. And so the easiest way to start is with vehicles, heavy trucks and buses that return to base at night. So you think of, a transit bus, it's operating on an urban route. They refuel or they fuel up in the morning. They're out on the route all day. They come back at night to the same place. So you only need one fueling station for that. Same as heavy trucks that have a route and then come back to a depot at night. Refueling those types of heavy transportation vehicles are a lot more feasible than trying to build a network of fueling stations from coast to coast, as we're experiencing with battery electric vehicles as well. Like it's not hard to do. It's just really complicated.
Let's give Mr. Lakeman, he's got less than a minute to respond.
Complicated was the key word there. So I think there's a little more complexity sometimes with the hydrogen because it is not as established, I guess, as that electrification system. So when you think about what needs to be put in place for refueling infrastructure, it may just be the station, but it may also be the hydrogen may be produced on site, or it may need to be moved a distance. So there's some additional costs there. There's more complexity with more organizations, more companies that have to be pulled together. So I think we need to recognize in the early days, it's supports need to be maybe somewhat different. I think it's supported that it's included, but also need to understand it may take a little more work to get there.
Well, thank you, colleagues, and a big thank you to our witnesses. It was an excellent panel. I think you'll agree. Everything you wanted to know about hydrogen, blue, green, white. There is pink and gray, I understand. And colleagues, I want to give the analysts a shout out because you may have noticed we've started to group witnesses and group topics, and so we get the benefit of witnesses like we had today who, frankly, I think the whole was more than the sum of the parts, and so we thank you. We, again, welcome briefs or any other information that you want to pass on to the committee, so thank you on behalf of the committee, and thank you, colleagues. So that concludes the panel. But colleagues, we have one more just item that we have to approve. $17,100 for the current study, and I understand it's because we've been eating a lot. Is that right?
Also sending headsets and inviting.
Okay, these are just costs we've incurred because we've had a couple of meetings. Do I have your concurrence, colleagues? Thank you. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.